My car broke down on a quiet road, but the woman who fixed it ended up rebuilding me. And when her sister stepped in, she made sure my heart never ran the same again. Broken Heart Sparkles the day my car broke down didn't feel unlucky, not at first. It was one of those late afternoons when the light turns soft and gold, when even the air feels slower, as if the world's taking a breath. I was halfway out of town, the road empty except for the rust-colored leaves skipping across the asphalt, when the engine sputtered once, coughed twice, and gave up completely. I sat there for a minute, the silence pressing in around me, and then I saw the small sign up ahead. Clara's Auto Repairs, letters faded, but still standing proud. I pushed the car the last few meters until I reached the workshop. That's when I saw her. Clara. She stepped out from behind an old pickup, wiping her hands on a rag. Her dark blue coveralls rolled to the elbows. There was a calmness in the way she moved, the kind of assurance that comes from years of fixing what's broken. Strands of chestnut hair had slipped loose from her braid, falling gently against her cheek. She didn't smile right away. She just studied the car, then looked at me with eyes that seemed to notice everything. "Engine trouble?" she asked. Her voice was low and even, like she didn't need to raise it to be heard. I nodded, suddenly aware of the smudge of grease on her wrist, the faint scent of motor oil mixed with something softer, maybe coffee or wildflowers. She popped the hood, leaned in, and within seconds her hands were working, deliberate, precise. I found myself watching, not just what she did, but how she did it. Every small motion carried purpose. Every breath seemed measured. When she realized I was staring, she glanced over, a tiny smile flickering before she spoke. "You can relax. I've seen worse engines." I chuckled awkwardly, leaning against the wall. That's comforting. I was starting to think this car had a personal grudge against me. That earned me a proper smile, brief, but real. While waiting for a part to arrive from a nearby shop, she poured coffee into 2 paper cups and handed me one. Our fingers brushed, just for a second, but the warmth of her skin stayed with me long after she pulled away. We stood outside the garage, sipping in silence, the evening settling around us. She told me she ran the place alone now. I didn't ask what happened to the we that used to be there, but something in her tone, that quiet ache underneath her steadiness, told me enough. As the sun dipped behind the trees, she handed me a small receipt and said softly, "You can leave it here overnight. I'll take care of it." Her words were simple, but something about the way she said take care of it made me feel like she wasn't just talking about the car. When I walked away that evening, I kept glancing back, and every time, she was still there, standing in the fading light, watching until I disappeared around the corner. And maybe it was just my imagination, but I could have sworn, for a moment, she looked like someone who had fixed 100 engines and never realized one of them might just be her own heart. The next morning, I found myself back at Clara's workshop earlier than necessary. She'd said she'd call when the car was ready, but something about her voice had lingered overnight, calm yet quietly weighted, like a melody that won't stop playing in the back of your mind. The garage door was half open, the hum of a small radio drifting out along with the faint smell of gasoline and morning coffee. Inside, Clara was already at work, sleeves rolled again, hair tied back, a few rebellious strands catching the light as she leaned over the open hood of my car. She looked up briefly, surprised but not displeased. "You're early," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes warm. I shrugged, trying not to sound too eager. "Didn't sleep much. Thought I'd check in, make sure you didn't give up on her." Her lips curved, not quite a laugh, but close. "I don't give up easily." I lingered by the workbench as she tightened a few bolts, her movements so sure and quiet that the air around her seemed to move slower. Every sound felt sharper, the click of metal, the faint hiss of a compressor, the rustle of her gloves. She didn't fill the silence with words, and somehow that made me want to talk more. "You run this place all by yourself?" I asked, just to hear her voice again. "For a while now," she said, wiping her hands. "My sister helps sometimes, but mostly it's me. Keeps me busy." There was something in the way she said busy, not as pride, but as a shield. She poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, handing one to me. When our fingers touched again, the warmth of her skin sent that same quiet spark through me. She didn't pull away quickly this time. Just a soft pause, like she noticed it too. The radio murmured a song from the 90s, one of those mellow tracks that sound like memory. I watched as she moved across the room, sunlight catching the faint silver in her hair. She wasn't the kind of beautiful that shouts. Hers was the kind that lingers, that unfolds slowly the longer you look. "You really care about your work," I said. She smiled faintly, setting the cup down. "Machines make sense. People, not so much." There it was, that quiet sadness again, hidden behind her calm. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the look in her eyes stopped me. Some silences aren't meant to be broken. She leaned over to point at something inside the engine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her shoulder brush my arm. My breath caught before I could stop it. She noticed, just barely. But instead of stepping back, she kept talking softly about how the spark plugs needed cleaning. When she finally straightened, her expression softened, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Come by later," she said. "It'll be ready. And maybe, you can tell me if it still sounds wrong." The afternoon sun was softer this time, slanting through the half-open garage door and spilling light over Clara's workbench. The air carried that familiar scent, motor oil, metal, and the faint sweetness of whatever perfume clung to her collar. She was bent over another car, her hair tied loose today, strands escaping and brushing against her cheek as she concentrated. I hesitated in the doorway, not wanting to break that quiet rhythm she seemed to move within. But before I could call out, a new voice filled the space, lighter, playful, and unmistakably familiar with the room. "So this is the guy with the cursed engine?" I turned, startled, to see a woman about Clara's age, maybe a few years younger, stepping out from behind the counter. Her hands were clean, her clothes neat, her smile immediate. "Elise," Clara said without looking up. "That's not how introductions work." Elise laughed, brushing a curl of auburn hair from her forehead. "I only meant the guy you've been talking about." She turned to me, extending her hand. "I'm her sister. You must be the mysterious customer who keeps finding reasons to come back." Her teasing tone caught me off guard, and I could feel the warmth rising to my face. Clara's wrench paused mid-turn, and though she didn't look at me, I could sense the faint stiffness in her shoulders. I shook Elise's hand, trying to keep my composure. "Guilty as charged. But to be fair, your sister's the only one who could get this thing running again." Elise laughed again, a bright, melodic sound that filled the workshop. "She's always been good at fixing things. People, though." Her eyes darted toward Clara. "That's a longer story." Clara set down the wrench and finally looked up, her expression somewhere between affection and warning. "Elise," she said gently, "don't you have a painting class this afternoon?" "I canceled it," Elise said, grinning. "Thought I'd help around the shop. Or maybe just see what kind of man gets my sister to smile again." That last line landed like a quiet spark between us. Clara's lips pressed together, her eyes briefly meeting mine, not with annoyance, but with something softer, unspoken. For the next hour, Elise stayed close, chatting, laughing, asking me about my work, my plans, the music I liked. She had a way of filling silence easily, a brightness that contrasted Clara's steady calm. But even while Elise talked, I found my eyes drifting toward Clara, to the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she kept her focus on her tools like they could anchor her. At one point, Elise caught me looking and smiled knowingly. "Careful," she whispered. She pretends she doesn't notice when someone stares, but she always does. Later, as I left the shop, I looked back once more. Elise was saying something animatedly, hands moving midair, but Clara wasn't listening. Her gaze followed me instead, quiet and unreadable. That night, lying awake, I couldn't decide what unsettled me more, Elise's boldness, or the way Clara's silence felt like it was holding a story she'd never told. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't going to be simple. I hesitated, glancing at Clara, who stood nearby tightening a bolt on an old motorcycle. She didn't look up, but I caught the faintest shift in her shoulders, a silent sigh. Maybe. Still, she didn't object. Just said quietly, 7 o'clock. Don't be late. By the time I arrived, the sun had slipped low, painting the small house beside the workshop in amber light. Through the window, I saw the two sisters moving around the kitchen, Elise talking animatedly, Clara listening in her quiet way. The sight felt strangely peaceful and dangerous all at once. Elise greeted me at the door, her energy as bright as ever. "He came," she called toward the kitchen. "I told you he would." Clara appeared a moment later, wiping her hands on a towel. Her eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, Everything around us seemed to slow. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft clinking of plates, even Elise's laughter in the background. "You found the place," she said simply. "I'd follow your directions anywhere," I said before I could stop myself. The words hung there, soft but too honest. Elise raised an eyebrow, smirking. Clara turned away, though I saw the faintest hint of color rise in her cheeks. Dinner was comfortable at first. The table was small, set with mismatched plates and a flickering candle that Elise insisted on lighting for atmosphere. The smell of roasted vegetables and garlic filled the air. Elise kept the conversation moving. Art shows, old friends, memories from when they were kids. I laughed when she teased Clara for being the serious one, though part of me sensed the truth behind it. "She's always been the protector," Elise said, smiling fondly, even when nobody asked her to be. Clara's gaze dropped to her plate. I wanted to reach across the table and touch her hand, to tell her she didn't have to carry everything alone. But I stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that felt full rather than empty. After dinner, Elise put on music, something soft and nostalgic, and poured us each a glass of wine. She talked about the art studio she wanted to open, about leaving town, about change. Clara listened, her expression unreadable, and I realized these sisters weren't just close. They were intertwined in ways that carried both love and history. When I offered to help with the dishes, Clara hesitated, then nodded. In the kitchen, the world felt smaller, quieter. The warm water ran over our hands as we worked side by side. At one point, we both reached for the same plate. Our fingers met, skin against skin, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Her breath hitched, just slightly. Then she whispered, not looking at me, "You should spend more time with Elise. She's better at this kind of thing." I frowned softly. "What kind of thing?" She set the plate down, her hands trembling just a little. "Smiling," she said. "Being open. People like her." There was a pause. "The kind that hurts and heals at once." "I like you," I said quietly. She closed her eyes, as if the words landed somewhere she'd been guarding for years. When she opened them again, there was something in her gaze, fear, maybe, or hope. Before either of us could speak again, Elise called from the living room. "You two coming, or are you planning to hide in there all night?" Clara stepped back quickly, wiping her hands, her composure returning like a mask. "Coming," she said, her voice steady again. But as we walked back into the light, I knew something had changed, small, fragile, but real. The kind of change that doesn't announce itself. It just hums quietly between two people, waiting for the right moment to be heard. The rain started that evening like it had been waiting for something to break. Thick clouds rolled over the town, swallowing what was left of the sunset. I hadn't planned on going back to the garage, not that night. But the storm made the world feel smaller, lonelier, and before I knew it, my car was turning down that narrow road again. Clara's workshop was still open. The lights glowed warm against the wet dark, the sound of rain drumming against the tin roof like a restless heartbeat. She was alone inside, stacking tools neatly on the counter. When I pushed the door open, she turned, startled at first, then her face softened. "You're drenched," she said. "What are you doing out in this weather?" I laughed quietly, brushing the water from my hair. "Honestly, I don't know. I just ended up here." She sighed, shaking her head, but there was the faintest smile at the corner of her lips. She reached for a towel, walking over to me. The smell of her, motor oil, coffee, and something faintly floral, mixed with the rain as she handed it over. "Here," she said. "Dry off before you catch a cold." When I took the towel, my fingers grazed hers. Not an accident this time. Just a pause that lingered longer than either of us expected. She didn't pull away immediately. Her eyes searched mine, steady but unsure. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain filled the silence, louder now, echoing through the small garage like a drumbeat we couldn't ignore. "I came to see you," I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. "Not the car." She blinked, looking away. "You shouldn't say that." "Why not?" Her breath trembled. "Because my sister." She stopped herself, closing her eyes. "Because it's complicated." I took a step closer, not touching her, just enough to feel the warmth radiating between us. "It doesn't have to be." She turned to face me then, her eyes shining in the dim light, equal parts resistance and longing. "You're too young to understand what you're asking for," she whispered. "People talk. They always do." "I'm not asking for anything," I said. I just want you to stop pretending you don't feel it too. The sound of rain filled the space again, wild and heavy. For a moment, she stood perfectly still, then her hand lifted slightly, as if it might reach for me. But halfway there, she froze, fingers curling back. I can't, she said softly, the words almost lost beneath the storm. I nodded slowly, understanding more in that silence than any confession could have told me. Still, I stayed, not moving, not speaking, just standing there beside her as thunder rolled in the distance. After a while, she looked up, her eyes tired but gentle. You should go, she said. I turned toward the door, heart aching. But before stepping out, I looked back one last time. She was standing by the workbench, head bowed, her hand resting against the metal surface as though she needed its strength to stay upright. And as the rain swallowed the night, I realized she wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of what it would mean if she finally stopped holding back. The garage stayed closed, lights off, door locked, a note taped to the window that simply read, "Back soon." I drove past every evening anyway, the way people sometimes circle a place that holds something unfinished. Each time, I told myself I'd stop, knock, ask if she was okay. Each time, I didn't. On the third afternoon, it wasn't Clara who appeared, it was Elise. She was sitting outside the small cafe near the town square, sketchbook open, a half-drunk cappuccino in front of her. She saw me before I could turn away and waved me over with that easy, familiar smile. I was starting to think you'd vanished, she said as I sat down. Clara's been quiet lately, which means something's happened. Her voice was casual, but her eyes were sharp, the kind that see more than you'd like them to. I hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of my cup. We talked. Or tried to. Oh. She leaned back, a knowing sigh escaping her lips. That explains it. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind carried the scent of rain-soaked earth, and somewhere nearby, a church bell rang. Elise flipped her sketchbook closed and looked at me fully. She told me, she said softly, about you, about how you make her feel. My breath caught. And how does she feel? Elise smiled faintly, not teasing, not cruel, just sad, terrified. I looked down, unsure what to say. She spent most of her life fixing things. Elise continued, her tone gentler now. Engines, homes, people me. Especially me. But she's never been good at letting anyone fix her. I stayed quiet, listening. The honesty in her voice left no room for defense. She's always put everyone else first, Elise said. When our parents split, she worked 2 jobs so I could paint. When I moved away, she sent money she didn't have. And when I came back, she didn't ask why. She just handed me a key and said, "You can stay." Elise's voice trembled slightly. That's who she is. She keeps her heart busy so it doesn't have time to break. A lump formed in my throat. She deserves more than that. Elise nodded, eyes glistening. She does. Which is why you can't walk away now. She'll tell herself she's doing the right thing, that she's protecting you, or me, or her reputation. But what she really needs is someone patient enough to wait until she stops running. Her words landed deep, not as a challenge, but as permission. She said something else. Elise added, her voice softer now. She said you looked at her like she wasn't invisible. I exhaled slowly, the ache in my chest shifting into something steadier. That's because she never was. Elise smiled, that bright, luminous smile she shared with her sister. Then go tell her that. Go remind her that it's okay to be seen. As I stood to leave, she reached out and squeezed my hand. Just be gentle, she said. She's stronger than she looks, but she's still learning how to be loved. The sky was beginning to clear when I walked back toward the garage. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened, like the world itself had just finished crying. And somewhere in the fading light, I knew this wasn't about chasing her anymore. It was about standing still long enough for her to find her way back. When I finally saw Clara again, the sky had that pale, forgiving glow that comes after days of rain. The air smelled fresh, like new beginnings trying to take root. Her garage door was open this time. Inside, she was wiping down the counters, her movements slower, quieter, as though the storm had drained something from her. She didn't notice me at first. I stood there in the doorway, watching her. The way her hair fell loosely against her neck, the faint smudge of oil still marking her wrist. When she finally looked up, our eyes met. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. You came back, she said softly. I told you I would. Her lips twitched, the smallest ghost of a smile. You shouldn't have. Maybe not, I said. But I wanted to. There was a stillness between us, fragile but alive. She turned away, busying herself with a stack of tools that didn't really need arranging. Elise talked to you, didn't she? I nodded. She told me the truth. Clara sighed, her shoulders lowering, like she was finally too tired to keep the wall up. She means well, she murmured. But she doesn't understand that not everything broken needs to be fixed. Maybe not, I said gently. But some things deserve a second chance. That made her pause. She set the wrench down and leaned against the workbench, arms crossed loosely, eyes glistening with something she didn't want to show. You don't know what you're asking for, she said. I've lived a lot more life than you. I've made mistakes. I've lost people. I've built my world out of keeping things running, not feeling this much. I stepped closer, slow enough for her to see it coming. Maybe that's why it matters, I said quietly. Because it's not about age or history or what anyone thinks. It's about you and me standing in the same place, right now, and not pretending it doesn't mean something. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, almost imperceptibly, her defenses cracked. She looked at me, really looked, and whatever she saw seemed to soften her completely. Her hand trembled as she reached for mine. Our fingers met halfway, hesitant at first, then steady. Her skin was warm, roughened slightly by work, yet her touch carried a gentleness that made everything around us blur. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Then don't, I said softly. Just be here. She exhaled, slow and shaky, and then, as if gravity had decided for her, she stepped closer, resting her hand against my chest. I felt the faint tremor of her breath, the warmth of her palm seeping through the fabric. Outside, the light shifted, sunlight spilling through the open door, glinting off the chrome of a car she'd just finished repairing. The world seemed quieter somehow, like it was holding its breath for us. She finally leaned in, resting her head against my shoulder. I didn't move, didn't speak, just felt the steady rhythm of her breathing, the weight of years she was finally letting go of. I don't want to be afraid anymore, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then don't, I murmured. We'll take it slow, one heartbeat at a time. Her fingers tightened around mine, a silent promise. And as the sun dipped lower, painting the walls in gold, I realized something simple and certain. I hadn't come here to be fixed. I'd come here to find someone who understood that even the strongest hearts sometimes need gentle hands. Headphone, if this story touched you, leave a red heart in the comments to let me know you were here. Subscribe for more slow burn age gap love stories, where every glance, every silence, and every heartbeat means something.